Good morning, everybody. As the Premier also said, I just want to start by thanking our thousands of teachers, our parents and our students during what has been a really challenging time. Learning from home is difficult. As a parent myself, I can attest to that. But each and every day I'm hearing wonderful stories about how our school communities right across New South Wales are supporting our students and our families to learn from home in the interests of their safety. I'm really pleased that today we are able to provide a clear roadmap to going back to the classroom. We know that the best teaching and learning happens in the classroom, but we also know it's really important for the social and emotional wellbeing of our students to be with their friends and to be back with their teachers. I want to thank all of the stakeholders who have contributed to our plan going forward. We've had some really positive discussions with them over the last few days, and I think everybody shares the view that this is a safe and a sensible approach to getting our students back to school, which is so important. So as the Premier said, we will be starting to see students return to the classroom from the 25th of October. It will be a staggered return. It's in line with how we expect to see increasing vaccination rates in our community, and we will also be having the strict COVID settings on our school site to make sure that we minimise risk to our students and our staff. As the Premier also said, if any communities come out of stay-at-home orders prior to that date, we will of course be able to see our students return to school. And again, that's in line with what we've done in other communities. If we're able to bring students back sooner in any LGAs, in any parts of the regions, of course we will do that. For the rest of Greater Sydney, of course, we end up with learning from home for the remainder of Term 3. Again, this is something that the Premier has outlined already this week. But from Term 4, from the 25th of October, our kindergarten and our Year 1 students will return to the classroom. We'll also allow for our Year 12 students to come back in a greater way than they are now. Obviously, at the moment, there's a limited return for Year 12 students. They can attend school for up to 2 hours a day. But from the 25th of October, we will be able to increase that. And that's particularly important to give those HSC students more time with their teachers face-to-face before their exams begin. From the 1st of November, we'll welcome back Year 2, Year 6 and Year 11, also crucial years, particularly those who are transitioning to high school and to their HSC work. And from 8th of November, all remaining year groups will be back in the classroom. As the Premier said, that is also the date when mandatory vaccinations will come into effect for our school staff. It's a key part of our plan. And we know that that's really important to protect our students. We've done a voluntary survey of our Department of Education staff over the last week. Pleasingly, we've had more than 50,000 staff respond to that. And that has given us an indication which shows that we have almost 70% of our workforce having already received 1 dose of the vaccination and close to 40% being double dosed already, which is really encouraging. We'll be making sure that we work with health to make sure our staff can access those vaccines. Again, as the Premier said, out at Kudos Bank Arena from the 6th of September, we'll have priority vaccinations for our school staff. We'll also open that to our early childhood education staff. And we know that this is important when it comes to protecting not just our workforce, but of course our students. When students do return to school, it will be on our Level 3 COVID restrictions. Again, these are settings that our school communities are used to. We've had them in place before. So what we will see are things like minimal mixing or mingling between students, not having extra adults on school sites, not having assemblies or large gatherings. We will also have mask wearing mandatory for all of our staff on our school sites, mandatory for our high school students, and we'll be strongly recommending that our primary school students also wear masks, and that's in line with the latest health advice. For our HSC students, can I say thank you so much for your patience and resilience. I think if we talk about any Year 12 cohort in recent times, you've certainly been through it. Your Year 11 was disrupted last year, and of course now you're learning from home in a really crucial period of your schooling. But it's really pleasing to be able to reassure you today that you will be able to do written exams, that you will be able to get an ATAR. If you want to go to university, you will be able to do that. And I think that should provide some comfort to our students who I know are finding it difficult during a time for them which is obviously stressful at the best of times, but equally challenging managing during a COVID setting. So NESA, who runs the HSC for all of the school sectors, has provided advice that we should delay the start of the exams until the 9th of November, as the Premier said. They will be releasing a new timetable in September, which will indicate to students when exams will be taking place. We anticipate that this means that the results will come out in mid-January, but again, the university sector have been consulted. They are able to accommodate those changes, and it does mean that any Year 12 student who wants to go to university will be able to be offered a place in line with previous years, and I think it's really important that our Year 12 students know that that is the case. So can I say, as Education Minister, I'm excited that we have a plan to have our students back in the classroom. I'm sure teachers would agree with that, and I'm sure parents, who I know many are doing their best during learning from home, but obviously it can be a bit of a challenge, should have some comfort knowing that we've got the plan going forward. We're excited to welcome our students back in a safe and a sensible way, and we look forward to that happening in October.
Minister, I think while most parents would welcome now the timeline, are you concerned that half the student population is going to have about 3 weeks of classroom teaching in 6 months? Because let's be honest, not much happens in December. So for those kids that go back November 8, that's going to be three or 4 weeks in 6 months of a year.
Right, so that'll be week 6 of an 11-week term. Look, obviously as Education Minister, can I say we don't make decisions to have students learning from home lightly. We know the best teaching and learning takes place in the classroom, but we've also got to balance that with the health advice and what we can do to keep our students and our staff safe. I think the key element now is that parents know the plan going forward. We continue with learning from home. There is an end date. There's light at the end of the tunnel for when students will be back, and that's important. But it's about getting that balance right between what's safe and what's sensible when it comes to the advice that we've got.
Minister, I understand that this plan says that students in any LGA could return to remote learning if the infectious number in the community passes 50 per 100,000. So based on that rule, which LGAs are the least likely to see their students return to school at this point?
So this is obviously the plan going forward for all of New South Wales, but what we will continue to do is rely on the health advice when it comes to specific local government areas. Again, that's not new. I'll draw your attention to, say, up in Armidale a few weeks ago, before regional New South Wales had lockdown restrictions. We had a positive case there. That entire LGA moved to learning from home. We have done this in other communities throughout the state as we've needed to. If we do have high case numbers in certain LGAs and the health advice is that we need to revert to learning from home in those areas, of course that's what we'll do as we manage throughout the pandemic. But what it does mean is that there won't be a blanket approach anymore. For schools that can be back safely, where there are low case numbers in the community, that will be able to occur, and I think that's the really important point.
Sorry, Minister, are there any LGAs right now that you are looking at, based on the case numbers that we're seeing today, are there any LGAs that pass that 50 per 100,000 figure and therefore will not go back to school under this?
Right, so obviously we need to look at that advice closer to the date. We're talking about a 25th of October return date. That's some 8 weeks away. We need to take that advice from health closer to the day. But again, I think this is about the public messaging around we all have to keep doing the right thing. We have to get vaccinated. We have to follow the stay-at-home orders, and the health advice will be given to us closer to that date in terms of any LGAs that may be affected. I can't preempt what that advice will be this far out.
Minister, if I could ask you about the vaccinations for teachers, which are now mandatory in November. ATAGI has just updated their advice for 12-year-olds to 15-year-olds. They're now okay to get Pfizer. Are you going to change the plan to make it mandatory for students in that age group to get vaccinated with Pfizer before they return to school?
No, we won't. Obviously, we strongly encourage anyone who's eligible for a vaccine to take up that opportunity. At the moment, anyone over the age of 16 can get access to a vaccine. I'm really pleased that the federal government have announced that they're extending that to 12-year-olds. Anything we can do to protect our school communities is really important. We won't be mandating for our students, but we will be strongly encouraging anybody who is eligible to get vaccinated, and that now, of course, includes anyone aged 12 and up.
We wanted teachers to be vaccinated by November 8th, but some schools in the regions could be returning after September 10. So can teachers in the region skip to the front of the queue? Many are still waiting another month for their first vaccine.
Yeah, so obviously the advice around what we can do in regional communities will be based on health. Clearly the risk in those communities will be lower if we are able to lift those stay-at-home orders. So it really is about looking at this in terms of that health matrix. Obviously anything that we can do to encourage our teachers and support them to get vaccinated, we will look at doing. I'm pleased, as I said, by those survey results that indicate almost 70% of our staff have had one jab already, which indicates they're booked in for their second dose already. I've had some colleagues get in touch with local GPs, local pharmacies who want to see what they they can do to support our teachers to get vaccinated. We'll continue to explore all of those options, particularly in the regions. And, you know, can I say, as someone who lives in regional New South Wales, there is ample supply of vaccines. Our community is having a vaxathon this weekend with our GPs and our pharmacists getting involved in Gunnedah, where I live. You know, there are a lot of opportunities for people to get vaccinated. Teachers now know right across the state that by the 8th of November that will be mandatory. They have 10 weeks to ensure that they're vaccinated.
But the Premier's indicated...
South West Sydney and Western Sydney, there's a lot of migrant families there. It's been really tough for parents across the board, but probably just or even more tough for parents there that don't have English as a first language, aren't as familiar with the Australian school curriculum and online learning tools. What will be done to give them support when they're sending their kids back to school and their kids have fallen behind during this lockdown period? What supports will they be offered to get their kids back up to speed? Yeah,
look, that's a great question. And I've been having regular roundtables with principals from South Western Sydney. And can I say I'm acutely aware of some of the challenges of families, particularly in that part of Sydney. I've had principals talk to me about some of the difficulties that families are facing, particularly when English isn't their first language or parents don't have strong literacy and numeracy skills, and the extra pressure that that is putting on families. I think that's why our decision, particularly to bring kindergarten and Year 1 students first back, is important. Clearly those formative years are just essential. And think about it, if you're a student in kindergarten or Year 1, you have not had a year at school yet that hasn't been disrupted by learning from home. That's significant. And so I think part of our challenge will be not just to support our communities through this extended learning from home period until October 25th, but also look at what we can do when we return to school. We've had our $337 million COVID intensive support tuition program running this year. That's continuing online. That will continue throughout Term 4 for really targeted literacy and numeracy support for students who need it most. And I think as government, we also then need to look at what more we need to do into next year, not just in terms of education support, but I'm really conscious of wellbeing support for our families who have struggled as well. And they're all things that we'll continue to work on.
Return to the classroom, what other health measures will be in place? Can you give us an indication as to what schools are going to have to implement to keep our children safe?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, as I said before, we'll be returning to our level 3 COVID restriction settings. All our school principals are aware of that. That has been in place for some time. So in simple terms, what it will mean are things like staggering break times, not having mixing of year group cohorts, not having assemblies, band, choir, those sort of activities, again, where children might be gathering together. We won't have any external visitors to school sites. And the mask wearing, I think, is a really important element. So obviously mandatory mask wearing for all of our staff on all of our school sites, mandatory mask wearing for all of our high school students. And for the first time, we will also strongly encourage our primary school students to wear masks. We have supplies that we will make available to our schools so that they can do this. And again, I think this is about giving our parents and our staff comfort. We know that we're going to have that vaccination rate for our teachers as a mandatory vaccination. We know we're having controlled COVID-safe settings in our classrooms and on our school sites. And so they're the elements together that give us the confidence in this plan when it comes to a return to school.
Minister, have you ruled out the option entirely? Have you ruled out the option of cancelling HSC exams altogether?
Yeah, so HSC exams will be going ahead. They will be starting on the 9th of November, as I said, and NSW will be providing an updated exam timetable in September for students so they can have that clarity.
What about in those LGAs of concern? What about in those LGAs of concern where you say that if cases increase significantly, that learning from home will resume? What happens if Year 12s are in those LGAs of concern before the HSC?
Yeah, so as the Premier said, you know, we have had a vaccine program for those Year 12 students already. They will be double vaccinated by the time those exams are scheduled, and indeed part of the consideration to delay those exams by a few weeks was to make sure that we had COVID-safe exam settings, and there was more confidence doing that from NSW from the 9th of November. We'll also make sure that any invigilators of those exams will also need to be vaccinated, again, in line with our requirements on school sites. And we will also have other measures in place. We've already started to seek advice from health around simple things like social distancing in those exam settings, looking at alternative venues. A lot of this work, again, was done by our school communities last year in preparation for a COVID-safe exam setting. So we feel confident with those rates going forward. The other point that I will make, the HSC has been running for many years. Every year there are illness and misadventure provisions. They were in place last year, they'll be in place this year. So if any particular student at the day of their exams is unable to attend because they're unwell, if they're impacted by being a COVID close contact, there are already procedures in place to help them as individuals in terms of the assessment of their results. If for whatever reason they need to miss their exam, that's not new. We've done that last year. We do it when there's bushfires or natural events, and there are really good mechanisms in place through NSW who run the HSC to accommodate for any of those issues on a school-by-school basis.
Minister, if there is an outbreak in a school, what is the plan then? We've seen outbreaks before. Does the school get shut down? If so, for how long?
Yeah, so we've got great measures in place when it comes to protecting and dealing with COVID cases in our school communities. Again, over the last 18 months, we've had a number of schools that have been impacted by positive cases with either our teachers or students or members of school families. So what happens if there is a positive case in a school is that obviously we close that school, we work with health to do the relevant contact tracing, make sure that those who need to isolate do so. There is a deep clean conducted on those schools, and then they're reopened when they're safe to do so. We've been doing this since last year. We've done it throughout the course of the pandemic, and we'll continue to do that while we're living with COVID-19.
Does it mean that the marking will go over Christmas, that teachers would actually work through their holidays?
Yeah, so obviously what this does mean is that, yes, the time period for the marking of those examinations will also be pushed back. That's why we're looking at a January 15 or midway through January as the expected date for results. But again, NSW will confirm that exact date in the coming weeks. But, you know, we've had conversations with our teachers and our school communities about this. The HSC is a really important end to 13 years of schooling, and I think everybody shares the view that we have to do what we can to support our students so that they can do their written exams, so that they can be marked. Obviously, our universities have been incredibly accommodating to be able to push back to that January release date for exams. So, you know, we're all supporting the Year 12 students to be able to get their HSC. It's important, and we feel confident that we will be able to have the markers that we need and to get this process done, albeit slightly later than we would have normally done it.
Can you confirm if it will be all subjects? We've heard it may be just a handful, maybe only English, and whether there'll be some sat outside.
So obviously those are decisions that the NSW COVID committee will make and provide advice to government shortly. That COVID committee, I should say, is made up of representatives of all three school sectors and also teachers and principals. Look, as Education Minister, I want as many students as possible to be able to show us what they know through their written examinations, but I await that advice from NSW in terms of what that new timetable will look like and further details which are to come.